If you close your eyes now, imagine a world where the sun has dimmed. Not set, not vanished, but retreated behind a curtain of ash so thick that daylight resembles twilight, and twilight resembles the last breath of a dying star. This is the world that awaited humanity in the year 536 AD, a year remembered not by kings or chroniclers alone, but by the earth itself. Volcanoes in distant lands erupted with a fury the world had not seen in generations. Ash clouds rose so high they stabbed the sky, spread across continents, swallowed oceans, and smothered the warmth that life depended upon. It was the winter that did not arrive through nature's cycles, but through nature's collapse. A winter that stretched not for months, but for years. And in this tale, wrapped in the rhythm of sleep, you will learn why you would not survive this world. Not because you lack courage, not because you lack strength, but because the world itself turned against the living, slowly, quietly, relentlessly. You will walk through a reborn fantasy of the frozen kingdoms, inspired by the ash-choked world of 536 AD. A world of fractured realms, collapsing faiths, desperate alliances, quiet betrayals, and a young seer who could feel the heartbeat of the world beneath her feet. Settle your breathing. Let the cold fog of this ancient world surround you, and follow the story deeper. For this is the tale of kingdoms swallowed in ash, and the people who fought simply to see the return of dawn. The dimmed sun. Before the kingdoms fractured, before the ashlands split open, before the cults rose like frost-fed weeds, there was a morning when shepherds looked up and could not find the sun. It was there, somewhere, but muted, washed pale, as though wrapped in gauze. Birds circled in confusion. The air chilled without warning. Shadows grew longer even at midday. No one knew it then. Yet this was the first sign of the great ashen winter. Within weeks, temperatures plummeted. Crops withered. Winds shifted their ancient roots. Snow fell in regions untouched by winter for centuries. Strange frost formed in spirals atop roofs and fields, patterns no scholar could explain. And at the center of the known world, the northern strongholds, the last bastion of winter's endurance, felt their stones crack under the sudden change. It is here that the story begins. With Erden, heir of the strongholds, returning after weeks of absence. He expected cold. He expected hunger. He did not expect collapse. The strongholds had once been carved into mountains like unbreakable fortresses, their walls thick, their hearths warm, their people hardened by centuries of winter storms. But ash and frost together created a weight no architecture could bear. Snow, heavy with volcanic dust, slid from roofs in deadly sheets. Lower districts drowned in gray drifts. Farms vanished entirely. The people were ghosts wrapped in blankets. Erden returns to the broken north. When Erden entered the main square, wrapped in furs, stiff with frost, the survivors stepped from their shelters just to look at him. Their eyes carried a plea he could not answer. They whispered rumors behind cracked lips. He abandoned us. He went searching for the sun. He died in the ashlands. That thing is not Erden at all. He ignored the murmurs. Nothing they could say hurt more than the truth he saw. A kingdom starving. Inside the great hall, only a handful of counselors remained. Half had fled or defected. Some had died. Some had been killed when food ran out. The reports came in one by one. Grain stores nearly empty. Livestock dead. Bandits prowling the outer passes. Cults preaching the end of warmth. A quarter of the army missing Erden took a long breath and closed his eyes. He had seen horrors in the ashlands, visions carved into stone, ancient mechanisms humming beneath the earth, whispers rising from the deep fire caverns. But this suffering struck deeper. These were his people. He ordered consolidation of survivors into central districts, fires to be shared, rations guarded, no fighting, no panic, not yet. But he knew the truth. The North was no longer one kingdom. It was fragments, held together by frostbite and the thinnest threads of hope. And hope in this winter cracked as easily as frozen bone. Morian's marshlands begin to fracture far away. In the southern mistmarsh, Queen Morian Blackwing faced her own unraveling. She had been prepared, always prepared. Her realm survived the first year of the ash winter, better than most, because she had hoarded food, consolidated power, and ensured that no hunger would break her people. But survival brings ambition. Ambition brings betrayal. Her generals began acting like warlords, collecting their own taxes, seizing grain caravans, even forming private armies. The natural marsh defenses froze into black plains of jagged ice, exposing her borders. Caravans that once moved along waterways now froze in place, prey to starving beasts. 3 of her grain stores burned in mysterious fires. 2 generals vanished. Symbols of a cult she once thought controllable began appearing on the walls of her capital. Morian clenched her jaw and stared southward. She needed control. She needed leverage. She needed something more powerful than her collapsing chain of command. And though she would never admit it aloud, she needed Erden. The Ash Seer returns. Meanwhile, far from politics and hunger, Lada, the young seer touched by the obelisk, returned toward the strongholds, accompanied by monks who feared her more than adored her. She did not sleep. She drifted. She walked with visions of fire and frost colliding inside her mind. Sometimes her eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Sometimes she spoke in languages older than stone. Sometimes she whispered names of things buried deeper than memory. Erden greeted her with reverence and dread. She simply nodded. She carried the truth of the world's wound, but she could not reveal it. Not yet. The kingdoms were fragile. Too fragile. Her burden was heavier than prophecy. It was decision. Decision of who would have to die. The Brotherhood rises in the shadows. Across all kingdoms, starvation and fear gave life to the Brotherhood of the Hungry Sun. No longer a fringe sect, the Brotherhood grew into an underground force. They carved symbols into doors, whispering promises of salvation through sacrifice. They whispered that the sun dimmed because humanity had forgotten its place. They whispered that warmth would return only if the old balance was restored. They whispered that the obelisk and those who touched it must be reclaimed. Their herald moved unseen. A figure said to walk untouched through ash storms, to hear prayers buried under snow, to see through stone. He welcomed all rumors. Rumors were power, and the world was starving for something to believe. The gathering of the fractured kingdoms. When Erden and Lada finally confronted Morian Blackwing across a dimly lit war table, it was not as enemies, not as rivals, not even as rulers. They faced one another as survivors of a dying world. Maps lay unrolled across the table, some torn, some burned at the edges. Marks of destroyed towns dotted the north. Charred symbols of collapsed trade routes scarred the mistmarsh. Faded borders of the south showed regions swallowed by ash dunes and frozen rivers. Erden spoke first. "The world is breaking faster than we can repair it." Morian's eyes narrowed. but held no arrogance, only exhaustion. "The world was breaking long before we noticed," she replied. Lotta stepped into the flickering torchlight. Her presence chilled the room, not from cold, but from the sense that she carried truths too heavy to speak. She placed a hand on the map where the volcanic belt curved like a scar across the southern horizon. "This is where it began," she whispered, "and where it must end." The room fell silent. Odoric, exile, hunter, survivor, approached with cautious steps. He spread a parchment showing tunnels beneath the mountain where he once wandered alone. "They gather here," he said. "The Brotherhood. Their herald seeks something in the deep fire." Morian exhaled through her teeth. "He seeks control." Lotta shook her head. "He seeks release." Another silence. A different one. The kind born when truth becomes louder than fear. The first alliance of the Ashen Age. For the first time in centuries, the North and the marshlands exchanged banners not for war, but for survival. Villagers watched as combined forces marched across the last thawing plains. Northern soldiers, lean and frost-burned. Marshland skirmishers, masked and nimble. Monks carrying relics. Alchemists hauling tools, and Lotta walking silently ahead, as though guided by the mountain itself. Parents whispered to their children, "Perhaps spring will return, perhaps warmth will come, perhaps the world will breathe again." But they whispered these things softly, because hope had become fragile. As fragile as the ice forming at dawn. As fragile as the world's dwindling warmth. The long march south. The march to the volcanic belt pushed every traveler to the edge of endurance. Snow no longer fell as snow. It fell as gray dust, mixing with ash until it clung to cloaks like shadows. Breathing grew difficult. Eyes burned. Water froze in skins faster than fires could thaw it. Each night, the temperature plunged. Fires flickered pathetically, fighting the cold as if arguing with a greater force. Soldiers slept in shifts, huddled so close their breath rose in a single cloud. Horses collapsed. Tents tore under wind pressure. Arguments erupted from hunger and fear. Once, 2 men fought over a scrap of salted root. Once, a marsh scout tried to desert, only to freeze before reaching the next ridge. But they continued. Erden steadied tempers. Morian kept discipline. Odoric hunted and soothed disputes. Lotta moved silently through the camp, her dreams growing stronger. She saw fire beneath the world. She saw tunnels glowing with amber veins. She saw a fractured lattice pulsing with warnings. And she saw herself standing before the obelisk. Not alive. Not dead. Something between. She told no one. Not yet. The Basral Empire, entombed in ash. After many days, the expedition reached what had once been Basral, the jewel of the southern continent. It was gone. Entire cities lay buried beneath thick ash. Palaces melted by heat and then frozen mid-collapse. Statues toppled, gardens petrified. Erden walked among the ruins of an amphitheater, where laughter once echoed. Now only wind moaned through broken arches. Morian paused at the remains of a library, charred scrolls still clinging to shelves like dying leaves. "This was a kingdom that believed itself eternal," she said quietly. Odoric brushed ash from a shattered column. "Nothing is eternal." Leda looked toward the mountain in the distance, glowing faintly beneath clouds. "Something is," she whispered. But no one heard. The volcano's shadow. The volcanic titan dominated the horizon, a monstrous silhouette rising into an ash-streaked sky. Its slopes radiated unnatural heat, steam hissing through cracks and vents. Lightning flashed around its peak, yet no thunder followed. a silent storm, a breathing giant. The expedition slowed. Horses panicked. Some soldiers refused to go farther. Erden ordered everyone to press on. "We have crossed the winter," he said. "We can cross this." But even he felt the ground vibrating, resonating like an immense heartbeat. Its rhythm was wrong, too deliberate, too alive. The closer they drew, the more Lotta struggled to breathe. "The obelisk is weakening," she said one night near the slopes. "The world's anchor is slipping." "What happens if it breaks?" Morian asked. Lotta stared into the fire. "The world chooses another balance. And that balance," Erden pressed. She looked at him with eyes that seemed older than the mountain. "Not one we survive." No one spoke for a long time. The deep fire caverns. At the volcano's foot, a gaping cavern yawned open, glowing from within with the light of molten rivers. Inside, heat shimmered in waves. Rock bridges stretched over chasms of magma. Steam exploded from vents without warning. Walls vibrated with ancient power. The caverns were a labyrinth carved by gods or by time itself. The expedition moved cautiously. One misstep meant death. One panicked breath could cause collapse. Morian's alchemists identified deep fire crystals embedded in the walls, rare minerals capable of binding the obelisk. Extracting them required silence and precision. Days passed, food ran low, soldiers grew faint from heat, but the crystals were harvested. Yet the expedition was not alone. Symbols of the Brotherhood appeared on cavern walls, scorched into stone. Offerings melted together. Footprints led deeper, toward the heart of the mountain. "The herald is here," Odoric whispered. Lotta closed her eyes. "He has been waiting." The herald waits in the heart of fire. Deep inside the volcanic caverns, beneath ceilings glowing with molten veins, beneath stone that trembled with ancient pressure, the expedition reached a vast chamber. It was a cathedral of fire, so large that the echoes of boots vanished before returning, consumed by the roar of molten rivers. And on a cracked platform at the center stood the herald of the hungry sun. His obsidian mask reflected the firelight, giving him the appearance of a being forged from darkness itself. Cloaked in soot-stained robes, he raised a hand in eerie welcome. "You have come far," he said, his voice soft, almost tender, as though addressing friends rather than those who opposed him. "But the world has come farther. It has tired of imbalance. It has tired of your struggle. It begs to be released from the weight of warmth." Odoric drew his blade. Erden stepped forward. Morian signaled her archers, but the herald only tilted his head. "You seek to restore what nature seeks to end. Why cling to life so fiercely when life itself seeks peace and stillness?" His followers, dozens of them, emerged from behind stone pillars and shadowed alcoves. Their eyes were hollow, their devotion absolute. The herald extended both arms. "Kill me, and the winter remains. Spare me, and I end your suffering quickly." Erden's teeth clenched. Morian raised her spear. Lotta felt visions clawing at the edges of her mind. And then the herald whispered a single word. "Begin." The battle on the cracked bridge. The cavern eruption did not come from earth, it came from steel. Arrows hissed like angry insects, blades clashed, screams echoed, flames illuminated the chaos in flickering bursts. The bridge spanning the molten river cracked under the weight of bodies. Desperate soldiers grappled along the narrow walkway, some falling, vanishing in bursts of orange light far below. The herald glided through the chaos like smoke. He evaded strikes by inches, He countered with unnerving precision. His movements were not those of a human warrior, but something lighter, older. Morian's arrows sliced the air around him. Erden charged, pushing through cultists with brute force. Odoric's blade intercepted the heralds more than once, each clash ringing with unnatural resonance. But even as they fought, Lotta vanished. She followed a pull deeper into the chamber, slipping behind a stone archway, where a pulsating glow beckoned. The crystal core, the heart of the conduit, awaited her. The herald saw her escape. He broke away and sprinted after her. Odoric lunged, intercepting him mid-step. Their blades collided. Sparks erupted. Stone trembled. The two men crashed into the adjacent chamber, where the crystal core glowed with a haunting luminescence, veins of amber and gold pulsing like a heartbeat. The death of the herald. The herald moved with relentless certainty. "You cannot stop me," he hissed. "The world calls for rest, for silence, for cold." He lunged toward Lotta. But Odoric intercepted him with a roar, spinning his blade downward in a heavy arc. The herald ducked, swept Odoric's legs, and drove him toward the cavern's edge. Odoric held his footing, barely. Lotta touched the crystal core. It pulsed violently beneath her fingers, sending shock waves through the chamber. The herald froze, then twisted toward her, mask glowing with reflected light. He charged. Odoric saw the opening. He thrust forward. Steel met obsidian. The herald stumbled onto a loose ledge. The ground cracked, gave way, collapsed. The herald fell into the molten abyss below. His scream was swallowed instantly by the roar of fire. The cultists above faltered. Their unity dissolved. But the mountain did not stop trembling, because the world's wound had only begun to open. Lotta's sacrifice. The crystal core glowed brighter, unbearably bright. Lotta pressed her hand against it, her breath trembling. The cavern lights dimmed. Cycles of amber surged into her body like molten veins. Erden and Morian pushed through the last of the cultists and stumbled into the chamber. They froze, horrified. Lotta's form shimmered, light bending through her as though she were no longer built of flesh, but of fragile crystal and fading warmth. Erden screamed her name. Morian reached for her, but heat rolled outward, pushing them back as though a wall of sunlight had erupted from the core. Lotta looked at them with soft, serene eyes. "The world needs light more than it needs me." Her voice fragmented, like echoes layered over one another. She closed her eyes and dissolved. Her body fractured into streams of radiant energy, absorbed into the crystal lattice. A shock wave detonated upward through the caverns. Above ground, ash clouds cracked apart. Light pierced the dim sky. The air warmed. The sun breathed again, and Lotta was gone. The world breathes. The expedition staggered out of the caverns hours later, blinking into the dim yet returning light. The wind felt warmer. The ash fell more softly. A faint smell of spring drifted through the air. Erden collapsed to his knees. Morian looked away, jaw trembling. Odoric covered his face with shaking hands. None spoke, none could. Behind them the volcano's glow dimmed. Below them the conduits hummed with a new, fragile balance. Ahead of them, the world waited, trembling, wounded, but alive. For the first time in years, people dared to hope. The years that followed. Spring did not arrive immediately. The winter did not end in a single burst of sunlight. But month by month the sky brightened, fields softened, ice retreated, birdsong returned to forests thought dead. The kingdoms rebuilt slowly. Morian restructured her fractured realm, cutting away corruption and forging a new order based not on fear, but necessity. Erden stepped down from the throne within a decade, passing leadership to a council shaped by the harsh lessons of the Ashen Winter. Odoric wandered from village to village, carrying with him a story the world refused to forget. And the obelisk. The obelisk pulsed with a faint amber glow, matching the rhythm of a girl who had given everything to pull the sun back into the sky. But something else pulsed beneath the earth. Something ancient. Something reawakened. Because the reforging did not solve the world's wound. It merely bought time. The quiet years and the uneasy peace. In the softened winters that followed Lada's sacrifice, the kingdoms slowly began to resemble themselves again. Snow melted earlier each year, crops sprouted timidly at first, then confidently. Trade routes reopened across thawed rivers and broken passes. Children grew up hearing stories of the Ashen Winter as if it were a distant myth, rather than something their parents had survived by the narrowest margin. But memory is a fragile thing. People forget pain when warmth returns, and the world, though healing, had not forgotten. Deep under the soil and stone, the ancient lattice of conduits, the hidden architecture that regulated the balance between cold and heat, stirred like an awakening mind. When Lada merged with the crystal core, she restored the obelisk, but she also reactivated the entire network beneath the continents. The obelisk's glow in the northern temple remained soft, rhythmic, but beneath its quiet pulse lingered a faint tension, a vibration just out of reach, a tremor almost too gentle to perceive. The keepers of the dawn claimed it was nothing more than the world breathing again. They were wrong. It was the world remembering. Erden's final years, the Chronicler King. Erden lived long enough to see the first children born into a world no longer starving. He spent his final years recording everything. Every battle, every famine, every fracture between kingdoms, every symbol carved in ash and ice. His chronicles were not a tale of glory. They were a warning, a confession, a memory of all the mistakes that nearly ended the world. He wrote, "If winter returns, let it not find us arrogant. If fire returns, let it not find us blind." When he died, quietly, peacefully, the people placed his writings beside the obelisk, believing the stone itself might remember him. Morian's legacy, the Iron Marsh Queen. Morian Blackwing lived even longer. Her rule hardened the Mistmarsh into a realm of discipline and vigilance. She cut down corruption. She dismantled private armies. She rebuilt networks of trust through measures that were strict but fair. Yet not all remembered her kindly. Some whispered of the cold decisions she made during the worst years. Some claimed she had once allied with the Brotherhood. Some insisted she had blood on her hands. Morian never denied anything. One night, near the end of her reign, she told her advisor, "If they hate me, let them hate the truth. Let them not hate a lie." When she died, her statue was placed not in a plaza, but at the edge of the marsh, watching the horizon she spent so long guarding. Odoric, the wandering memory. Odoric left the councils, the cities, the palaces. He wandered alone through forests where the ash had finally cleared, through valleys where rivers flowed free again, through villages rebuilt with hands that still trembled from remembered hunger. Children loved him. Adults respected him. But none knew the full weight he carried, the moment the herald fell, the moment Lada vanished in light. the moment the world shifted beneath his feet. He carved small figurines, mountains, suns, doors that would not close, and left them in the homes of strangers. Memories carved in wood. In the last years of his life, he told a group of children, "We survived not because we were strong, but because the world allowed us a second chance." He did not finish the sentence he wanted to say, and second chances have limits. The next generation, forgetting the cold years past, decades softened the scars. A new generation grew, one untouched by starvation, untouched by ash drifts burying homes, untouched by the terror of a sky that forgot how to shine. They did not understand ration laws. They did not understand the need to conserve grain. They did not understand why elders flinched at the sound of cracking ice. They saw safety, not fragility. Prosperity, not balance. They saw the obelisk not as salvation, but as a relic of superstition. And among this new generation rose a voice, bold, charismatic, and dangerous. Tyrann. Young, graceful in speech, electric with ambition. He addressed crowds in busy squares, flames reflecting in his eager eyes. Why must we live afraid of a winter that ended long ago? Why must we bow to a stone that hums in the night? The world is ours, not the past's. People cheered. Crowds grew. He spoke of freedom from old fear, of progress beyond old warnings, of a future brighter than the dim past that held their parents hostage. No one realized that in rejecting fear, they were inviting ignorance. The Southern scholar, Sira. While Tyrann stirred the hearts of youth, far south on the coastline lived a woman who understood the danger they could not see. Sarah, a quiet historian of the volcanic belt, charted tremors and underground heat flows. Her observatory stood atop cliffs overlooking ash-stained waters. She spent nights listening to the earth through instruments older than the kingdoms. One evening she discovered a tremor pattern unlike any recorded before. Not random, not natural, not tectonic. It was structured. 3 pulses, a pause, 2 pulses, a long vibration, a sequence. She repeated the recording. Again and again. The pattern never changed. A message. Her heart pounded. She compared it to ancient symbols found near Basril ruins, the ones Erden documented. She compared it to the geometric markings in the caverns Lada had entered. The pattern was identical. The lattice beneath the world was speaking. She wrote a report and sent it north with urgency. But the storm chased her messenger, and she feared the truth. The lattice was not merely reawakening. It was calling. The second warning. The shard in the nets. Weeks later, fishermen along the southern coast found shards, crystal fragments glowing faint blue, tangled in their nets. When they picked them up, the shards vibrated in their palms, humming like faintly singing stones. Sarah received one of these shards. When she touched it, she felt warmth, then cold, then a vibration, identical to the tremors she had recorded. The shards were parts of the lattice, and they were rising to the surface, not by accident, by emergence. She sent her second report north. This time the stewards listened. A little. The masked wanderer appears. Across the ashlands, where black forests grew twisted by ancient heat, hunters spotted a strange figure moving through frost and ash without leaving footprints. A tall silhouette, a mask reflecting moonlight, a shard glowing at their chest. The wanderer moved with purpose, never speaking, never resting, listening to the ground. Where they stepped, warmth followed, just a breath of it, a pocket of impossible heat. People whispered, "The herald has returned. A ghost walks. A prophet rises." But the wanderer was none of these. They were something older, something awakened, something summoned. The shard they carried, cracked amber, began to glow brighter with each passing day. Sarah's tremors aligned with the wanderer's movements. Something was converging. The first great tremor. Near the end of the year, the strongholds felt a tremor unmatched since the days before the ashen winter. Bowls rattled, icicles shattered, snow slid from roofs in crashing waves. Sarah's third report arrived on the same day. The lattice is aligning. The eastern conduit is unstable. A reset is possible. Most stewards paled. Some dismissed it. Tyrion mocked it openly. But in the temple, the elder keepers gathered around the obelisk, and for the first time since Lada's sacrifice, the obelisk hummed out loud, a deep, resonant tone that vibrated in bone and stone alike. Something beneath the world was awakening fully. The night, the obelisk called. The humming from the obelisk lasted only a few breaths, but the effect rippled through the entire stronghold. Snow shook loose from rooftops. The old bells in the watchtowers rang on their own. In distant barns, animals stirred violently, sensing something their human caretakers could not. Inside the temple, the air grew warm, not from fire, but from resonance. The keepers of the dawn rose from meditation in alarm. One of them whispered, "Something beneath the world is moving again." The elder keeper stepped closer to the obelisk and placed his palm on the stone surface. A tremor ran through his body. His eyes widened. "It is responding," he said. "Not to us, not to prayer, but to something approaching." Outside, the storm clouds shuddered with faint flashes of amber light. Only a few understood. Only a few remembered this color. Deep fire. The same glow that once consumed Lada. Tyrion's rising voice. While the temple quaked with meaning, the main square of the strongholds filled with a crowd mesmerized by Tyrion's charisma. He stood atop the steps of the old ration hall, a symbol of fear and starvation, and used it as a stage to condemn the very memories that saved the kingdom. "Listen to me," he shouted, his voice echoing across stone. "The stewards cling to fears older than we are. They hide behind prophecies and relics, behind trembling priests and flickering stones. They do not want progress. They want obedience," people murmured. The younger ones nodded. Tyrion lifted a hand, pointing toward the temple. "Why should we live under the shadow of a stone that tells us when to fear? Why should we kneel to a monument built in a time of desperation? We survived the winter. We will survive whatever comes next." Some cheered loudly. An old woman near the front shook her head. "You survived nothing," she whispered. "You were born after it." But her voice was lost beneath the roar of the crowd. Tyrion smiled, the smile of a man who believed himself chosen. He spread his arms. "The world trembles not because it is ending, but because it is beginning again. We must not fear the earth's awakening. We must rise with it." The cheering grew louder. He did not know that the earth was not rising. It was warning. The shard falls from the sky. At the edge of the crowd, a guard noticed something strange, a flicker in the dark clouds above, like a spark of blue lightning. Then, a sound cracked the air. Not thunder. A sharp whistling, like heated stone cutting through frozen wind. People looked up. A streak of blue light tore across the sky and plunged downward, slamming into the center of the square with a shock wave that rattled windows and threw people to the ground. When the dust settled, a single crystal shard lay embedded in the cobblestone, glowing, humming, vibrating like a living thing. Blue light pulsed softly from its core, the same shade that appeared in the fishermen's nets, the same color Sarah recorded. The square fell silent. Tyrion stared at the shard, his confidence flickering. Sarah, who had just arrived breathless at the strongholds after days of travel, pushed through the crowd, kneeling by the fragment. "It came from the lattice," she murmured, "forced upward through the crust." The stewards looked horrified. "Is the world breaking?" one asked. Sarah shook her head slowly. "No, the world is reaching out." The arrival of the masked wanderer. Before anyone could process the meaning of the shard, the western gate sounded its horn, not the alert of invasion, but the signal for something unknown, something unclassified. A lone horse thundered into the square, collapsing from exhaustion as the rider slid off, breathless and pale. "A figure," he gasped, "a masked figure, walking toward the strongholds. The ground trembles in their steps." And he swallowed hard. The frost melts beneath them. A ripple of fear moved through the crowd. The shard at Sarah's feet pulsed sharply, brightening. As though sensing the wanderer's approach, Sarah's eyes widened. "It's responding to them," she whispered. Just then, the gates shuddered. Hours earlier, people would have believed it was wind. But now, everyone understood. Footsteps, slow, heavy, purposeful. The masked wanderer stepped through the gate, tall, cloaked, silent. Their mask reflected torches and moonlight with a mirrored sheen. The crowd parted instinctively. No one dared move. No one dared breathe. The wanderer walked toward the square, and the shard embedded in the stones glowed brighter and brighter as they approached. The wanderer stopped a few paces from Sarah, tilting their head as though studying her. Then they raised a gloved hand. The tremors ceased. Silence fell over the strongholds. People felt the weight of something ancient standing before them. Not evil, not good. Something awakened. Something summoned. The trembling of the obelisk. Inside the temple, the obelisk reacted first. Its amber light flared, spilling through the carved windows onto the snowy streets. Lines of golden illumination crawled across its surface, the same geometric pathways that once formed in the deep fire caverns. The ground quivered. Dust rained from the ceiling. The keepers clasped their hands in terror. Sarah stood slowly, heart pounding. "The obelisk is sinking with the lattice," she whispered. "And with them." She turned to the wanderer. "What are you?" The masked figure didn't answer. Instead, they opened their cloak. Inside, a single cracked amber shard glowed like a dying star fighting to stay lit. Sarah inhaled sharply. "That shard, it's from the mountain, from the same core Leda touched." The wanderer lowered their head, a quiet acknowledgement. Tyrion's folly. Tyrion, regaining some of his shaken pride, stepped forward. "This is nothing but spectacle," he declared, fear dressed as prophecy. "You," he pointed at the wanderer, "are a pretender. Remove the mask and face the people." The wanderer slowly lifted a hand to the mask. But before revealing anything, the obelisk screamed. Not metaphorically, not symbolically. A sound like tearing stone and rushing wind blasted through the temple, rolling out across the strongholds. Everyone dropped to their knees. Torches went dark. Windows shattered inward. Birds fled the rooftops in a panicked cloud. The wanderer froze mid-motion, mask still in place. Sarah clutched her head. "The eastern conduit," she whispered. "It's collapsing." The wanderer turned toward the temple, their posture suddenly rigid. The ground trembled in rhythmic pulses, not destructive, but communicative. A signal. The wanderer finally spoke, voice deep and resonant, echoing through the entire square. "Convergence." Sarah's breath caught in her chest. "Tyrion, this is not fear. It's not superstition. The lattice is aligning. And if it collapses—" The wanderer finished for her. The world resets. The crowd murmured in horror. Tyrion stumbled back, suddenly pale. The temple awakens. The moment the masked wanderer uttered the word convergence, the entire stronghold seemed to inhale. Not the people, the stone. The obelisk inside the temple pulsed again, brighter than any torch, brighter than any star that had pierced the ashen winter sky. Its glow spilled over the temple floor, weaving itself into intricate geometric patterns that hadn't been seen since Lada's final breath. The symbols spread outward in smooth amber lines, circles, arcs, branches, nodes, a map of something vast, something beneath them. The temple doors blew open under invisible pressure, letting an amber wind sweep through the square. It carried warmth unlike any winter breeze, an ancient warmth, raw and primordial, like the breath of the earth's core. Snow melted where the wind touched. Frost receded from stone. People backed away instinctively. The wanderer stepped forward, moving toward the temple entrance with slow certainty. Sarah followed. The crowd parted as though moved by an unseen hand. Even Tyrion, whose voice had rallied thousands, now felt small, his bravado evaporating like snow on heated stone. The elder keeper stumbled from the temple steps. "Do not enter," he shouted. "The obelisk is—" He didn't finish. A tremor rolled beneath his feet, lifting him slightly before setting him down again. His staff rattled in his hands. The wanderer raised their hand, the cracked amber shard glowing faintly. "It calls," they said. "For what?" Sarah asked. The wanderer turned their masked face toward her. "For what was lost." They stepped inside. Sarah inhaled sharply but followed. The doors slammed shut behind them. Inside the chamber of resonance. Inside the temple, the air shimmered with amber light. The obelisk towered above them, its inner lattice glowing like a heart burning slowly through stone. But the floor was what stole Sarah's breath. A full projection of the subterranean lattice sprawled across the marble tiles, shifting and pulsing gently in rhythm. 3 glowing nodes flashed in and out of focus. The ashlands, the southern ocean floor, the far eastern mountains. Each node flickered between amber and red, the sign of instability. Sarah knelt, tracing the red node with trembling fingers. "The eastern anchor is collapsing," she whispered. "The lattice is losing support." The wanderer approached the obelisk. Their shattered shard vibrated intensely. "How do we stop it?" Sarah asked. The wanderer did not look at her. "It must be restored." "How?" she pressed. The wanderer finally turned toward her. "You rebuild what the winter broke." Sarah's eyes widened. "You mean all 3 anchors must be repaired?" The wanderer shook their head. "No, only one must be stabilized. The lattice will realign itself if one anchor holds." Sarah exhaled in relief, until the wanderer continued. "But reaching any anchor may be impossible." She froze. "Why?" "Because the lattice has begun to defend itself." A wave of heat pulsed from the obelisk, as if responding. The earth speaks far beneath the strongholds, deep beyond any mine shaft or cavern known to man. The conduits of the ancient system ignited in glowing amber lines. hidden chambers lit with synchronized pulses, like neurons firing in a colossal mind. Deep under the ashlands, magma chambers vibrated with rhythmic light. Under the marshes, flooded tunnels shivered. Under the eastern mountains, layers of forgotten stone rotated imperceptibly, not by tectonic pressure, but by deliberate, mechanical motion. The lattice was not simply waking. It was activating. Something older than kingdoms, older than the winter, older than the written names of the first people. And its activation created cracks in the world above. In the mist marsh, reeds bowed as warm wind rose from the soil. In the dead of winter. In the south, coastlines pulsed with faint blue light beneath the waves. In the frontier towns of the north, hunters spoke of hearing whispers beneath their boots. Not human whispers, not voices. More like vibration made language. Something was speaking through the earth, and something else was answering. The fear in the streets. Outside the temple, panic rose like a tide. Citizens clutched their children. Merchants abandoned their stalls. The younger generation, empowered only hours ago by Tyrann's speeches, stood frozen, unsure whether to flee or pretend nothing was wrong. Tyrann attempted to regain control. "Do not be fooled," he shouted above the trembling streets. "This is the earth adjusting. This is not a prophecy. This is natural change." But no one listened now. His authority, so confident moments before, dissolved under the weight of an undeniable truth. The world itself was speaking in a language older than his ideology. A second tremor shook the square. Snow fell from balconies. Cracks appeared along the temple steps. Tyrann's followers began backing away. For the first time in his life, Tyrann felt fear. Real primal fear. He whispered, "What have I done?" No one answered, because all eyes were fixed on the temple's doors, waiting, hoping, dreading. The code of the lattice. Inside the temple, Sarah watched the patterns shift across the marble floor. The 3 nodes pulsed again. Amber, amber, red. The eastern node glowed brightest. "Sarah," the wanderer said calmly, "you must understand the lattice is not evil. It is not alive, as you know life. It is balance. It is the mechanism through which the world maintains its cycle." Sarah touched the projection of the eastern node. "And if it fails?" The wanderer stood at her side. "Then the world attempts to reset its equilibrium. The ashen winter was not death. It was a symptom, a system failure." Sarah swallowed. "And a reset?" "A reset," the wanderer said quietly, "rewrites the rules of life on the surface." Her heart dropped. "How long do we have?" she whispered. The wanderer looked toward the obelisk. The crystal began to vibrate violently. Not long. The shattered sky. Outside, citizens lifted their eyes as a low rumble echoed across the sky. Clouds parted, not with sunlight, but with streaks of pulsing light, like veins glowing behind a thin shell. Amber lightning crawled across the heavens in near silence, forming branching patterns eerily similar to those glowing beneath the earth. The lattice was mapping itself onto the sky. Children cried, elders knelt, warriors gripped their weapons uselessly. The world was becoming a mirror, above and below. And all mirrors eventually reveal truth. The return of heat. Suddenly, warmth rushed across the strongholds. Not gentle warmth, but sudden, overwhelming heat, as though the world had taken a deep breath of molten air. Frost melted instantly. Icicles dripped. Snow became steam. People gasped, panting as their bodies struggled to adapt. The conduits, Sarah whispered from inside the temple. "They're shifting energy. Too quickly." "It is correcting," the Wanderer said. "But corrections can destroy." The map of doom. As the room trembled, the obelisk projected a final image onto the floor. A full, glowing map of the world, every mountain, ocean trench, valley, desert, and frozen expanse, overlaid with the luminous lines of the lattice. The eastern node flickered red. Once, twice, then a long, pulsing warning. Sarah stared. "This is global," she whispered. "If the eastern conduit collapses, the entire system destabilizes." The Wanderer nodded. The winter you knew was a whisper of what would follow. The first fractures. The eastern node flickered again, and this time the tremor that followed rippled across the entire surface world. It began as a subtle vibration, like distant thunder buried underground. But then it grew, rolling across the plains, passing under villages, through mountain passes, beneath rivers that quivered as though alive. In the north, walls shuddered. In the marshlands, the wetlands steamed. In the south, waves rose unnaturally in perfectly timed surges. The tremor did not destroy. It measured, as if the earth were taking inventory of everything it held. In the Mistmarsh capital, a group of fishermen watched in horror as their shallow river began glowing from below. Whispers rippled through the reeds, vibrations so gentle they barely disturbed the water's surface. "What is it?" one whispered. The oldest among them dipped a hand into the water and felt faint warmth rise from the depths. "The world is dreaming," he said, voice trembling. "But dreams become storms." Reports of the impossible messengers arrived at the strongholds one after another, exhausted, panicked, bearing messages from every surviving corner of the world. From the ashlands, entire fields of glass-like filaments had grown overnight, then vanished by sunrise. Hunters reported seeing animals freeze in place, as if listening to something beneath the soil. From the marshlands, water levels rose and fell in rhythmic pulses, timed perfectly with the tremors. A tree split down its center from a burst of heat, though the surrounding air remained icy cold. From the southern coast, fishermen found dead fish floating in glowing water, crystalline threads woven through their scales like strange runes. From the far west, a mountain emitted a low humming sound that vibrated for an hour straight. No eruption, no smoke, just sound. The stewards read each report with growing dread. "These are signs," one whispered. "Warnings," corrected another. Sarah only shook her head. "No, not warnings. Processes. The lattice is adjusting itself." Erden, were he alive, might have understood. Morian might have seen strategy where others saw chaos. Lada would have known everything, but none of them stood in the council hall now. Only Sarah, and the masked wanderer, and a world remembering itself. The Wanderer reveals the truth. Inside the resonating temple, the Wanderer approached the glowing world map on the stone floor. Each conduit line pulsed with amber light. Each node shimmered like a star. Sarah stood beside them, voice barely above a whisper. "You knew this was going to happen." The Wanderer turned their masked face toward her. "I knew the lattice would awaken eventually, but not this soon, not this violently." "Why is it happening now?" "Because of the reforging," the Wanderer answered. "Because balance was restored, but incompletely." Sarah's stomach twisted. "So Lada's sacrifice—" The Wanderer interrupted gently. "Restored the obelisk, but the conduits beneath the world remained fractured. Now they seek unity, A unity they cannot achieve. Sarah touched the eastern node on the projection. The eastern anchor is weakest. Yes. Then we go there. The Wanderer remained still. And do what? They asked. Face a system older than mountains? Touch forces that burn even seers to ash? Sarah didn't back down. You said it can be stabilized. The Wanderer lowered their head. A small, almost sorrowful gesture. It can, but not alone. The obelisk pulsed again, its light reflecting across the Wanderer's mask. Sarah took a breath. What are you? Who are you? For the first time, the Wanderer answered without hesitation. I am the last echo-bearer of the deep fire, a guardian of the conduits, a witness to the world's balance. I was awakened when the obelisk broke, when Lada touched the heart of the mountain. Sarah swallowed. So you were created? No, they whispered. I was awakened. There is a difference. Awakened by what? The Wanderer stepped closer to the obelisk. By her. Sarah froze. Lada? The Wanderer nodded slowly. Her essence merged with the lattice. She did not die. She transformed. And somewhere in the ancient network, she still moves. Sarah's breath trembled. Alive? In a way, the Wanderer said softly. Alive enough to call for rebuilding. Alive enough to awaken me. Alive enough to feel the world collapsing again. Sarah's voice broke. And alive enough to be lost forever if the lattice fails. The Wanderer said nothing. They didn't need to. The cities react. While the temple's truth grew heavy, chaos spread across the kingdoms. In the marshlands, newly risen steam vents burst from riverbeds, releasing plumes of warm fog that blanketed entire districts. People moved through it like ghosts, whispering that the marsh was breathing. In the south, sailors returned to harbors, claiming that lights flickered beneath the waves. Not reflections, not fish, but entire geometric shapes glowing faint blue. In frontier towns of the north, children began dreaming of amber tunnels and crystal chambers, despite never having seen such places. They spoke of voices humming softly beneath the soil. In the capital itself, panic spread as buildings shook with rhythmic pulses. Merchants abandoned their stands. Guards struggled to maintain order. The people who once cheered Tyrion now begged him for answers he did not have. And the obelisk, towering above them all, pulsed like a great heart, beating beneath stone. Tyrion falls silent. Tyrion stood on the steps of the ration hall, staring at the trembling world around him. The young man who once shouted confidently now felt the weight of silence pressing against his ribs. His closest followers surrounded him. Say something, one pleaded. They're expecting you to lead. But Tyrion could not. His hands shook slightly. His lips parted, but no sound came. What could he say? That he had been wrong? That the fear he mocked was justified? That the world was unraveling faster than his bravado could contain? A young girl approached him. Is the winter coming back? She asked quietly. Tyrion looked into her eyes, wide, frightened, searching for reassurance he no longer possessed. He couldn't lie. I don't know. The girl nodded, and stepped back into the crowd. Tyrion felt smaller than he had ever felt in his life. The second great tremor. The ground shuddered again, harder, deeper, more resonant than ever. The pulse carried through the temple, across the city, through the mountains, over the plains. Then came silence. A long, horrible silence. And then a sound like cracking ice, but deeper, older, more final. Sarah leaned over the map projection. The eastern conduit, she whispered. The Wanderer finished her sentence. It is collapsing. Slowly, The projection of the eastern node turned from red to dark crimson. Not flickering, not pulsing, steadily, steadily dying. Sarah's throat tightened. How long do we have? The Wanderer touched the obelisk with their cracked shard. The obelisk shook so violently the walls trembled. Not long, they said. Not long at all. The world begins to sink. The collapse of the eastern conduit did not arrive like an explosion. It arrived like a sigh. A long, low exhale from somewhere deep within the earth, so deep that no human had ever walked there. A place older than civilization, older than ice, older even than fire. People across the kingdoms paused as the ground beneath their feet softened. Just slightly, barely noticeable, but enough for instinct to recoil. In the far eastern mountains, snow slid down slopes with unnatural grace, forming perfect spirals before settling. Entire cliffs vibrated in silent pulses. In the southern deserts, the sand rippled like water disturbed by a stone, creating patterns that mirrored the conduits beneath. In the great Basral ruins, still buried in ash from decades prior, long dead halls echoed with a distant hum, like ancient architecture remembering the world it once knew. Even the mist marsh felt the shift. The waterline dipped half a finger's length, then rose again, in a perfect rhythm. People fell silent. The world's balance had tilted. The obelisk enters a new state. Inside the temple, the obelisk's transformation accelerated. Its surface rippled like molten glass, rapidly cooling and reheating. New symbols appeared, bright and alive, forming and dissolving in cycles too fast for the eye to follow. Amber light seeped from its seams, casting Sarah and the Wanderer in surreal shadow. Sarah shielded her eyes. It's never been this active before. It was not meant to awaken alone, the Wanderer said. The anchors were designed to share the strain. Now one is gone. A sharp vibration shot across the floor. The projection of the lattice flickered violently. Sarah steadied herself. Is it failing? No, said the Wanderer. It is compensating. Compensating how? The Wanderer looked up at the great stone spire. With power, the surface world cannot endure. Sarah feels the lattice. Suddenly the obelisk pulsed, not outward, but inward, drawing Sarah's breath from her lungs. She staggered. Her hand struck the floor as a jolt of white-hot energy shot through her palms. Lines of amber light crawled up her arms like veins of living fire. Sarah! The Wanderer reached toward her, but the obelisk sent another pulse, forcing them back. Sarah gasped, and then she saw. Not the temple, not the strongholds, not the world above. She saw below, chambers the size of continents, crystals like mountains, veins of golden light weaving through cooled stone, molten rivers redirected by ancient mechanisms, tunnels spiraling for miles beneath the crust. And at the center of this vast network, something flickering, something small, something familiar. Sarah's voice cracked. Lada. The vision vanished. She collapsed, trembling. The truth of Lada. Sarah stared at the Wanderer as realization dawned. She's in the lattice, alive in a way we don't understand. The Wanderer nodded. When she gave herself to the core, she became part of the system, part of the conduit memory. She is the reason the obelisk found balance at all. Sarah clenched her fists. Then she's suffering as the lattice collapses. Not suffering, the Wanderer corrected gently. Struggling, holding the balance as best she can. Sarah felt tears sting her eyes. She saved the world once. We cannot let her be lost again. The Wanderer placed the cracked shard against the obelisk. We will not. thunder without storms. Outside, a strange phenomenon swept across the skies. Thunder rumbled, deep, rolling thunder. Yet the clouds did not move. No lightning flashed. No wind stirred. It was the earth's own voice, a sound forced upward by shifting conduits, echoing through hollow chambers, rising like the breath of a giant beneath a blanket of soil. People froze in streets and markets. Even livestock went still. In the strongholds, Tyrion looked up with wide eyes. In the marshlands, Morian's successors ordered scouts to every vent and fissure. In southern towns, children clung to elders. One thing was clear to all: this was no winter, no storm, no wrath of gods. This was machinery, ancient machinery groaning under strain. The three signs of collapse. Inside the temple, the obelisk projected new symbols across the floor map. The Wanderer knelt, tracing them with a gloved hand. The lattice has entered the first stage of collapse. 3 signs mark the beginning. Sarah steadied her breathing. What signs? The Wanderer pointed. 1. Surface instability. Conduits warming and cooling unpredictably. Earth sinking. Sky flickering. 2. Energetic feedback. Worldwide pulses. Thunder without storms. Rising heat waves in winter. 3. Node desync. One anchor fully failing, the others unable to compensate. Sarah touched the projection. And if the collapse reaches stage 4? There is no stage 4, the Wanderer said. Only reset. Sarah swallowed. How long before stage 3 becomes irreversible? The Wanderer hesitated. A long silence. Hours. A day at most. A chill ran through her. We have to act now. The strongholds begin to break. As if hearing her words, the city trembled violently. Stone walls cracked. Frost shook from the fortifications. Snow slid from rooftops in avalanches of white dust. A watchtower tilted ever so slightly, groaning against the tremor. People screamed. Guards ran. Children cried for parents. Tyrion stood paralyzed as a fissure split the street beside him. Not a chaotic crack, but a straight, geometric line. A line shaped exactly like the lattice pattern beneath the world. The tremor passed, but the fear it left behind grew roots. The Wanderer takes action inside the temple. The Wanderer pressed their palm to the obelisk. Golden light surged through their arm, across their chest, into the cracked shard embedded within their cloak. The mask flickered with reflections. Sarah stepped back as the entire chamber vibrated. "What are you doing?" "Activating an old protocol," the Wanderer said through clenched teeth. "A conduit override. But it costs energy. My energy." Sarah's heart raced. "You can't." "I must. The world needs guidance. The lattice listens to echo bearers." A beat. And to those it awakened. The obelisk pulsed. The Wanderer trembled. Sarah grabbed their arm. "We'll stabilize the eastern anchor together." "No," the Wanderer whispered. "You cannot go where I go." The obelisk flashed white. The Wanderer collapsed to their knees. The map changes. The projection on the floor shifted. A new path illuminated itself, a route through tunnels no human had mapped, leading toward the distant eastern mountains. Sarah stared. "This is the route to the anchor." The Wanderer nodded faintly. "And the anchor is calling." Sarah clenched her jaw. "Then I'm going." The Wanderer looked up at her, masked, glowing, exhausted. "You cannot enter the anchor chamber without a catalyst shard. The lattice would tear you apart." Sarah reached into the basket beside the table. She lifted the blue shard found in the square. "I have one." The Wanderer stared silently, and then, softly, "Then you may survive the entrance." They stood, slowly, and the obelisk pulsed once more, long, low, a sound that was not a warning, a summons. The decision to leave the obelisk's projection shimmered, revealing a path carved not by hands, but by time older than kingdoms. Its glowing lines crossed mountain roots, magma tunnels, submerged caverns, and hollow spaces where even light feared to linger. Sarah traced the projected route with trembling fingers. "This is impossible," she whispered. "No one has ever walked these depths." The wanderer stepped beside her, voice calm. "No one alive." Sarah looked up sharply. "Can you guide me?" "I can guide you," the wanderer said. "But I cannot protect you. The lattice allows no illusions. Below the crust, the world is raw, unfiltered, and hostile to mortal anatomy." Sarah held the blue shard tighter. "I don't care." The wanderer studied her. "You speak as one who has nothing to lose." Sarah nodded, eyes shining with a mix of fear and determination. "If Lada gave her life to stop the world from freezing, then I can give mine to keep it from breaking apart." The wanderer lowered their head in acknowledgement. "You may lose more than life," they murmured. "The lattice changes what it touches." Sarah didn't flinch. "Then let it." The strongholds crumbled before they departed. A violent tremor cut through the city. Walls split. Stone towers cracked like eggshells. Bridges bowed under invisible weight. People screamed in streets dusted by falling masonry. A lone watchtower leaned so far that its bell swung wildly, ringing a funeral toll for a world collapsing in slow motion. Tyrion ran into the square, shouting orders, trying to restore order, but for the first time, no one listened. A woman grabbed his arm. "Is this what you promised us? A world without fear?" He tried to answer, but words failed him, because fear had returned. Not from memory, from the trembling ground beneath their feet. The temple doors open. Inside the temple, the obelisk pulsed once more, projecting new lines across the map. Sarah steadied her breathing. "The path leads through caverns under the eastern mountains, and then deeper, far deeper." The wanderer nodded. "We must leave immediately. The conduit collapse accelerates every hour." "How long will the journey take?" The wanderer looked toward the eastern horizon. "If the world cooperates, a few days. And if it doesn't?" The wanderer said nothing. That silence was enough. The departure before dawn, Sarah and the wanderer slipped out of the strongholds through a half-collapsed gate. The streets lay deserted except for frightened families huddling inside their homes. Windows glowed with candlelight. Voices whispered in fear. The sky above glimmered with faint amber veins, like cracks spreading across a porcelain dome. At the gate, the wanderer paused, touching the frost-dusted stone. "The world is thinning," they said quietly. "What does that mean?" Sarah asked. "That the membrane between surface and lattice grows weaker. Soon, what lies below may bleed into what lies above." Sarah tightened her grip on the shard. "Then we have no time." They began walking. Behind them, the strongholds groaned under another tremor. It sounded almost like a warning, almost like a goodbye. The road east. The world changed as they traveled. Forests whispered. Snow fell upward in strange spirals. Rivers steamed even in freezing air. Sarah felt her shard warming in response to distant pulses. She felt vibrations beneath her boots, as if messages traveled through stone. After hours of silence, she finally asked, "Can the people survive a reset?" The wanderer walked slowly, steadily, cloak billowing softly behind them. "No," they said. Sarah's breath hitched. What would it look like? Heat where cold should be, cold where heat should be. Oceans rising incorrectly, winds reversing, the sun dimming, not because of ash, but because of alignment. Crops dying not from winter, but from confusion. Sarah shuddered. And life? Life survives everything, the wanderer said softly. But humanity, civilization, the things you cherish. They paused. They would not survive the shift. Sarah looked at the shard in her hand. Then we must not let it happen. The night signs. As evening approached, they made camp near the edge of the eastern wilds, a desolate region where snow met jagged stone, and vegetation grew only in tangled knots. The sky flickered with amber threads. Sarah asked, "Why is the sky responding? The lattice is beneath the earth." The wanderer gazed upward. The lattice is not merely a system below. It is a network of balance. When it awakens, it touches all layers: stone, sky, water, heat. It breathes. The sky is only reflecting that breath. Sarah lay awake long after the wanderer fell still. She watched the sky pulse gently, like a sleeping giant turning under blankets of cloud. Something ancient had been roused, something that had not moved in thousands of years. The first whisper. Just before dawn, Sarah jolted awake. A sound pressed against her skull, soft, high, almost musical. It wasn't external. It was inside her, inside the shard she held. "Sarah," a faint voice breathed. She sat up violently. The wanderer turned immediately, sensing the change. "What happened?" Sarah clutched the shard. "I heard her." The wanderer froze. "Lotta?" Sarah nodded. She whispered my name. The wanderer approached slowly, kneeling. This should not be possible. Sarah shook her head. "It's faint, like an echo, but she's there." "Describe the voice." "Soft, tired, like she's far away." The wanderer exhaled. She is far away, deep in the lattice, beyond where any mortal mind can reach. But if you can hear her, they touched the shard gently. Then she can hear you. The world reacts to the whisper. The moment Sarah spoke Lotta's name aloud, the ground trembled, not violently but rhythmically in a pattern that seemed almost intentional. Snow dust spiraled in geometric shapes. A distant mountain glowed faintly at its base. The wanderer rose, cloak fluttering. "She has felt you. The lattice knows we are coming." "Is that good?" Sarah asked. The wanderer's silence answered her question. It was neither good nor bad. It simply was. The world had noticed them, and the world was beginning to respond. The Eastern Pass. They traveled the final stretch toward the eastern mountains. Peaks rose like frozen teeth in the gray morning light. The air smelled metallic, hinting at minerals churned by deep movement. The ground beneath them vibrated steadily now, as though they were walking on the skin of something enormous. Sarah whispered, "The conduit is close." The wanderer nodded. "But so is the instability. Once we enter, there is no turning back." Sarah took a breath. We go. The mountain opens. At the base of the highest peak, the wanderer lifted their cracked amber shard. The air pulsed. Stone shifted. A massive seam cracked down the mountain's face, opening like a great stone door. Warm air billowed out, carrying a glow that painted the snow in shades of orange and gold. Sarah swallowed. The entrance. The wanderer stepped inside. It begins. Sarah followed. Behind them, the mountain sealed itself with a tremor. The descent into the first chamber. Warm air pressed against Sarah's cheeks as she descended behind the wanderer through the freshly opened mountain seam. The light inside was dim at first, the color of dying embers. But the deeper they walked, the warmer and brighter it became, glowing through the stone like fire trapped behind sheets of amber glass. The walls were smooth, not carved, melted. Sarah touched the surface with trembling fingers. "It's glassified basalt," she whispered. "This rock was liquefied from the inside." "Not by magma," the wanderer replied. "By the lattice." She shivered without meaning to. She had imagined tunnels and caverns, not corridors molded by something that could reshape mountains at will. As they moved deeper, the walls widened into a vast chamber, shaped like a sphere with a flattened floor. Amber light pulsed in slow waves across its surface, traveling in spirals. Each pulse matched the rhythm of her shard. Sarah stepped forward, breath stolen from her chest. "This is the first layer," the wanderer finished. "The outermost membrane of the eastern anchor." The ground vibrated beneath their feet, steady, patient, ancient, like a heartbeat. The map of light. At the center of the chamber stood a platform carved from a single slab of crystal, clear, flawless, humming. Runes spiraled across its surface, shifting every few seconds like a living script. They were not letters. They were geometric sequences, patterns, frequencies, instructions. Sarah approached slowly. The wanderer placed their shard on the platform. A surge of amber light shot outward, racing along the chamber walls and revealing a breathtaking sight. A three-dimensional map hovered above the platform, a globe of the world, but not as humans saw it. Instead of mountains and oceans, it displayed veins of light, spiraling conduits, intersecting nodes, and lattice branches spreading beneath continents like roots of an impossible tree. Sarah gasped. "It's beautiful." The wanderer tilted their head. "And it is dying." Sarah's eyes locked onto the eastern conduit. Its light flickered violently, collapsing inward, like a lung struggling to draw breath. "That's why we're here," she whispered. "We have to stabilize it." The wanderer nodded. "But we must reach the anchor itself. This chamber is only the threshold." The pathway beneath the world. A low rumble shook the chamber. The map flickered. The floor vibrated. Sarah stepped back. "What was that?" "The lattice shifting," the wanderer said. "The conduit is collapsing faster now. It senses our presence. It accelerates to test our intent." Sarah swallowed hard. "Test us?" "Yes. To determine if we are worthy of interacting with its core." Another pulse rattled the walls, deeper, sharper, deliberate. Sarah felt her heartbeat sync with it. "Worthy," she murmured, "or dangerous?" The wanderer said nothing. That silence answered her. The first trial, the chasm of echoes. A section of the chamber wall peeled open like melting wax, revealing a sloping tunnel that descended into utter darkness. Sarah hesitated. The wanderer stepped into the black without pause. "There is nothing alive down here," they said. "But the lattice remembers movement. It reacts to memory." Sarah followed. For several minutes, the darkness was absolute. Then, a glow. The floor beneath them lit up in thin, amber lines, forming stepping paths suspended over a seemingly bottomless chasm. The air here hummed with resonance that grew louder as Sarah took another step. "What is this place?" she whispered. The wanderer paused on the first glowing step. "A memory chamber. The lattice echoes ancient patterns here. Every living being who has ever walked these depths left traces, even if they did not leave alive." Sarah's blood chilled. "And what does it want from us now?" to walk. They stepped onto the glowing path. Sarah followed, but the moment her foot touched the light, the chasm below surged with projections. Ghost-like silhouettes rippled upward, echoes of miners, wanderers, cultists, even ancient explorers whose clothing belonged to forgotten civilizations. They flickered like reflections in broken mirrors. Sarah froze. "They're watching us." "They are not," the Wanderer replied calmly. "These are records, not spirits. The lattice stores motion, vibration, fear, heat. It mirrors them when disturbed." Sarah forced herself to keep walking, but as she crossed the third step, one silhouette lunged. She gasped, almost fell, but the Wanderer caught her arm. "It cannot touch you. It is nothing but an echo." Except Sarah could have sworn she heard it whisper her name. The whisper returns. They crossed the chasm. The moment they stepped onto solid ground, the silhouettes dissolved into dust. But the whisper remained. "Sarah." This time it was unmistakable. It was Lada's voice, faint, distant, carried through vibrations rather than air. The Wanderer turned sharply. "You heard her again?" "Yes," Sarah breathed, and this time she sounded afraid. The Wanderer stiffened. She is too deep in the lattice to feel fear. Sarah met their masked gaze. "Then something deeper than her is afraid." The Wanderer did not dispute it. The second chamber, the broken pillars. The tunnel opened into a cavern that dwarfed the previous chamber. Pillars rose hundreds of feet high, carved from single crystals of amber, each glowing with fluctuating intensity. Some were cracked, others flickered. It looked like a cathedral built of light. Sarah stepped forward reverently. "This is beautiful." "It is collapsing," the Wanderer corrected. "These pillars regulate pressure between conduits. If they fail, the entire eastern anchor will implode." Sarah approached a pillar with a fracture running through its center. Soft pulses flickered irregularly inside. "This one is dying," she murmured. "It is the one closest to the surface." "What happens if it shatters?" The Wanderer pointed upward. "The mountain above us splits. Lava vents open. Ash rises, and the eastern half of the continent becomes uninhabitable." Sarah's heart pounded. "We have to fix it." The Wanderer placed their hand on the pillar. "It is not ours to fix. The anchor lies deeper still. This chamber only reflects the symptoms." Sarah clenched her fists. "Then we keep going." The Wanderer nodded. Down. The descent into the roots. A spiral staircase formed beneath their feet. Not stone, but crystallized light that grew with each pulse from the obelisk far above. Sarah could barely breathe. She felt herself sinking not just into the earth, but into time. With each step, the tremors grew louder. The light grew dimmer. The air grew warmer. The shard in her hand grew heavier. Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the third chamber. Sarah gasped. The Wanderer stopped. Even they were unsettled. The third chamber, the living lattice. The chamber walls moved, they pulsed, they shifted, they expanded and contracted like lungs. Amber light flowed through them in spiraling currents. Blue light pulsed in veins like arteries. The lattice was not stone. It was alive, not biological, but functional, responsive, awake. Sarah stepped back instinctively. "It's breathing." "Yes," the Wanderer said quietly. "This is the heart of the eastern anchor, and it senses you." The chamber vibrated with a gentle hum that escalated into a recognizable pattern. A call, a question, an invitation. The Wanderer turned toward Sarah. "It wants you to step forward," Sarah's voice shook. "Why me?" Because you heard her, the Wanderer said. Because the lattice recognized Lotta in you? Because you carry resonance? Sarah swallowed. And if I step forward? The Wanderer paused. Then it will judge you. Sarah closed her eyes. Then she stepped forward. The lattice brightened. The tremors stopped. The world seemed to hold its breath. The lattice chooses. The moment Sarah stepped forward, the entire chamber shifted. Not violently, not aggressively, but unmistakably, like a vast and ancient mind awakening enough to open one eye. Amber currents swirled through the living walls, reacting directly to her presence. The vibrations coiled around her like tendrils of invisible sound, reading her heartbeat, tasting her breath, measuring her warmth, her weight, her fear. The Wanderer watched from behind, motionless. Sarah whispered, "What is it doing to me?" Listening, the Wanderer replied quietly, "Feeling your resonance against its own. I don't understand. You do not need to understand. You only need to endure." The chamber pulsed. A low frequency rolled through the floor, up her legs, past her ribs, and into her skull. Her ears rang with a strange harmonics, neither painful nor pleasant, just vast. Then, light streamed from the walls in cascading ribbons, converging toward her. Sarah gasped and shielded her eyes. But the light passed through her hands, through her skin, through her thoughts. And for a moment, she saw through the lattice's perception. She saw the world not as terrain, but as pressure. Not as color, but as temperature. Not as people, but as vibrations. She saw conduits stretching beneath the seas. She saw dormant nodes pulsing like sleeping giants. She saw fractures forming beneath mountain roots. She saw the eastern anchor collapsing inward. And she saw Lotta. Her shape, barely visible, woven into the obelisk's memory, like a silhouette lost in sunlight. Lotta's essence was not a ghost. It was a lingering resonance, carried through the lattice as guidance. Lotta whispered, "Not destruction, correction." Sarah fell to her knees. The chamber dimmed. The Wanderer rushed forward, catching her as her legs buckled. "Sarah, stay awake." Her voice trembled. "I saw everything. The world isn't dying. It's resetting," the Wanderer finished, their masked face inches from hers. Sarah clutched their cloak. "But if the anchor collapses," "Yes," they said. "The reset becomes catastrophic." The identity of the Wanderer. Sarah steadied herself. She stared at the Wanderer with newfound clarity. "You knew this was coming," she said. "Long before the obelisk flickered, long before the tremors. You knew." The Wanderer lowered their head, but did not deny it. "Why?" she pressed. "How?" The Wanderer slowly reached up to their mask. For the first time, they unlaced the straps. Sarah held her breath. The mask lifted, and beneath it, a face. Not monstrous, not marked by zealotry, not scarred like a warrior's, but ageless, weathered by time yet untouched by it. Eyes glowing faintly with amber light, the same light as the lattice. Sarah whispered, "You're not human." They shook their head. "No, I am one of the first attuned." "Attuned to the lattice?" "Yes. To ensure balance, to read the tremors, to travel between nodes, to protect the anchors. Why did no one know your kind existed? Because we were not meant to intervene. As long as the world remained stable, we walked unseen." Sarah swallowed. "How many of you are left?" The Wanderer's lips tightened. "One." She stared at them, heart hollowing. "You're the last." "Yes, and I cannot repair what is coming. Only a human can complete the resonance cycle needed to stabilize the anchor." Sarah understood instantly. Because Lotta was human. Yes, the Wanderer murmured. And she touched the heart of the obelisk. She imprinted her resonance into the lattice itself. Sarah's eyes widened. And I have that resonance now. The Wanderer nodded. That is why the lattice chose you. The chamber begins to collapse. A deafening crack split the air. The eastern wall of the chamber rippled, then tore, sending sparks of amber light scattering like shattered glass. The floor heaved violently. The eastern anchor was failing. Sarah and the Wanderer clung to the crystal pillars for balance as shock waves slammed through the chamber. Streams of molten amber dripped from the ceiling like burning honey. The Wanderer grabbed Sarah's arm. We must reach the heart. Now. Where is it? Below. The floor split open beneath them, revealing a spiraling tunnel of light. Sarah stared down into a vortex of amber currents swirling like a slow storm. That can't be safe. It is the only path. The Wanderer stepped off the edge and floated downward as if weightless. Sarah hesitated only a heartbeat. Then she jumped. The heart of the anchor. The descent slowed, then stopped altogether. Sarah found herself standing in a circular chamber so bright, so vast, so alive that her lungs forgot how to breathe. This was no cavern. This was the core of an ancient system older than kingdoms, older than the ashen winter, older than written memory. Suspended in the center of the chamber was a sphere of amber light, as large as a watchtower, pulsing, flickering, dying, the eastern anchor. Sarah stepped closer. The sphere rippled as though sensing her presence. Thin strands of light stretched toward her like fingers reaching for warmth. The Wanderer spoke, voice almost reverent. This anchor once regulated the temperature of an entire hemisphere. If it collapses, the world will attempt a violent recalibration. Sarah nodded slowly. Tell me what I have to do. The Wanderer placed the cracked shard into her hands. You must offer the lattice a new resonance pattern, a stable one. How? By giving it what Lada gave the obelisk. Sarah stiffened. No, you must. I can't sacrifice myself. Sarah, the Wanderer said softly. Lada did not die. She integrated. She became part of the obelisk's stabilizing sequence. Sarah froze. Are you saying I will become part of the lattice? Yes. Forever? Yes. Her throat tightened. Why me? The Wanderer's eyes softened. Because you hear the lattice's voice, and it hears yours. Because the world has always needed someone willing to step forward when no one else could. And if I refuse? The chamber shook again. The anchor dimmed further. The temperature plummeted. Wind howled through cracks in reality itself. If you refuse, the Wanderer said, the world will freeze again, and this time no reforging will save it. Sarah stared at the dying sphere, at the trembling light, at the collapsing heartbeat of the world. Her fear melted, her breath steadied, her resolve crystallized. She turned to the Wanderer. What must I do? The Wanderer placed both hands over hers. Step into the light. Let the anchor read you. Let it carry your resonance across the lattice. Sarah inhaled deeply. Then she stepped forward. Her foot touched the sphere. The world exploded into light. The moment of resonance. When Sarah stepped into the sphere of amber light, she expected heat, burning, searing heat, like a furnace or molten glass. Instead, she felt warmth, gentle, ancient, like sunlight filtered through thick curtains on a winter morning. The light wrapped around her, lifting her weight off the stone floor. Her hair drifted upward, glowing as though made of dust motes. She exhaled, and her breath shimmered like drifting particles joining the sphere. The anchor recognized her. It tasted her resonance, measured her pulse, compared her inner rhythm to the pattern Lotta left behind. And then it opened. Sarah saw not with eyes, but with the warmth inside her mind. She saw the entire lattice, illuminated. She saw conduits that stretched under oceans and deserts. She saw dormant nodes flickering uncertainly. She saw fractures like cracks in frozen lakes. And she felt the pulse, weak, erratic, failing. She understood now. The world wasn't dying, it was coughing. It wasn't collapsing. It was shivering after centuries without guidance. It needed a stabilizing pattern, a human voice shaped by both fear and hope. It needed her. The sphere drew her deeper. Her body dissolved into vibration, her mind stretched like warm smoke. Thoughts drifted softly without urgency or fear. Her last physical feeling was the wanderer's hand releasing hers. Then, silence. A silence so deep it cradled her like a blanket. And then, a hum that grew into a tone that grew into a chord that resonated across the lattice, her voice, her resonance. Sarah had become the stabilizing pulse. The anchor restores. The moment Sarah's resonance aligned with the lattice, the entire chamber brightened. Amber currents surged outward in spirals, threading through the walls like veins filling with new life. The collapsing pillar above flickered and held. The spiral fissures along the eastern conduit pulsed and sealed themselves. Beneath distant oceans, cracked conduits glowed and stabilized. In the frozen cliffs of the far north, dormant nodes lit up like lanterns. Across the world, the tremors ceased. The volcanic ash vents closed. The unnaturally warm fissures cooled. The strange tides calmed. The pulsing shards fell silent. The lattice had realigned, balanced, alive. And Sarah's consciousness drifted in the heart of it. Not gone, not trapped, but woven into the circulatory system of the world. A guardian, a pulse, a memory that would never fade. The wanderer's farewell. The wanderer stood before the now stilled anchor, mask held in one hand. Their eyes glowed softly, reflecting the light of the restored chamber. "Sarah," they whispered. Not with sorrow, with reverence. She had given the world what only a human could, a pattern born of fear and courage, a voice shaped by choice, not duty. Her resonance drifted around the chamber in warm currents of sound. The wanderer closed their eyes as it brushed against them like a farewell touch. "You have done what none of the attuned could," they murmured. "Your world will remember you." A final pulse throbbed gently through the chamber. A goodbye. Then the anchor dimmed into a steady, peaceful glow, the glow of something mended. The wanderer placed their mask back over their face, turned, and walked away into the tunnels. Their purpose, long suspended between eras, was finally complete. For the first time in centuries, they felt tired and relieved. The world above. When the wanderer emerged from the mountain at dawn, a strange stillness blanketed the land. Not fear, not silence of anticipation, a silence of calm. The sky glowed with a soft golden haze. Frost on the grass shimmered as though touched by breath of spring. Birds, actual birds, circled above the valley, confused but singing. The strongholds felt the change instantly. Citizens stepped out of their homes with astonishment, hearing no trembling in the stones beneath their feet, no distant moaning of deep earth shifts, no flickering of the obelisk's light. The shard in the temple dimmed into a serene blue. The tremors stopped. The cold eased. The sun, still pale, still recovering, shone more steadily than it had in decades. Spring was not yet here, but the promise of it was. The lesson. Why you would not survive. 536 AD. The world that Sarah helped restore would one day forget the details. It always does. Children would grow up under a stable sky. Farmers would sow fields without watching for ash clouds. Villagers would warm themselves by quiet fires instead of rationing embers. But the truth of why modern people would not survive the volcanic winter of 536 AD remains unchanged. Because survival then was not comfort, not convenience, not endurance of cold. It was the ability to make unthinkable choices. Sarah stepped into light knowing she may never return. Lotta walked into the obelisk knowing she would dissolve. Erden rationed himself last. Morian surrendered her pride. Ordinary families fought doors that would not close. Entire nations held on, even when the world seemed to exhale frost instead of air. People of that age survived not because they were stronger, but because they understood suffering as a language. Modern life makes that language incomprehensible. They endured hunger that knotted their bones. You panic when you lose electricity for hours. They rationed warmth one ember at a time. You complain when your heater misbehaves. They walked through ash that killed harvests and sun. You check the weather app to avoid rain. They made choices that demanded a piece of themselves. You avoid choices that cost even a moment of discomfort. The volcanic winter of 536 AD was not a season. It was an era of sacrifice. And sacrifice is something the modern mind flinches from. The final scene, the quiet dawn. Years later, travelers walking near the old volcanic belt would sometimes pause at dawn, because if the air was still enough, and the frost thin enough, and the light gentle enough, they could hear a hum beneath the ground. Soft, calm, peaceful. The heartbeat of a world balanced by someone who chose to step into the light. A resonance shaped like a girl who carried fear and courage together. A memory of winter's deepest lesson. Dawn is never guaranteed, but always earned.